But that provides us with a little bit of an intro to a very distinguished panel of folks who have made a difference in legal tech over the last decade and beyond. We have Anne Datish, who is the Wilson Sonsini, where she's the Chief Innovation Officer. We have Omar Haroon at Udea. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing all things correctly, and where he's co-founder and has a history of successful entrepreneurship in the field. We have Teal Lidau, who is a principal at Lidau PC, where he does legal tech advising, investing, lawyering, a lot of different aspects on this. We have Charlie Moore, one of the great success stories of our field, the founder of Rocket Lawyer, and also Mary Ann Williams, who is a groundbreaking academic in this field at the University of New South Wales. So we have a bunch of perspectives. I've asked them each, because we have a crowded panel and not too much time, to try and focus on a few things that they think would help us when we're reflecting on where have we come from in this field over the last decade. I'm going to take 1 minute for myself, because a decade ago, in 2015, I got to give the keynote speech here, and in that context, I posed three things, basically legal tech 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0, and 1.0 was when it helped current people do current things. 2.0 was basically when it helped replace people who did current things, but still doing current things. And 3.0 was the system has changed over a bit. And at least if we can stick with that for just a second, my feeling is that we've made a lot of progress on 1.0. 2.0, AI in particular, is we're beginning to see the replacement of humans in that loop. But I'm not sure we've gotten to 3.0 as much as I thought we might, which is that the system is still looking largely like it did with these add-ons from some time ago. So anyway, that's my surprise for today, is that I don't think we got as far as I thought we would, but perhaps others will correct us. I'm going to start off with Anne. You're first. We'll just work our way down the row, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end both for some inter-panel discussion and for some questions.
Yeah, so I wanted to just touch on some of the systemic issues that maybe have caused us to not move as quickly as we otherwise could have, and hopefully I can avoid the perverse incentives of the billable hour or user psychologies. But at the user level, I think that there's something a little bit overlooked, which is just the fragmentation in our industry. You've got a lot of different attorneys doing different or the same things differently. And so there's not a lot of standardization, there's not a lot of top-down management, and there's very little mandated use of tech. So if you're a tech vendor, you actually are trying to sell enterprise software to consumers. And I think people fundamentally sometimes miss that you actually need the consumer grade UI and that kind of pool that consumer technology gives you, because you're not getting the help pushing it in a lot of cases, and especially at law firms, where I obviously am. And so I think the example of that I always like to use is DocuSign, because I think it had really the best organic adoption in the industry, because it struck that balance well of the UI and obviously solving a problem. Not purely consumer, but I think it's a good example of why did that get the organic adoption that most other things did not. And I think at the vendor level, that same fragmentation speaks to the kind of horizontality of our vertical. So as a vendor, you have to toe a very tight rope of not going too far in the horizontal direction and watering down your product so that it's not actually useful to anyone, and then on the flip side, specifying and specializing so much that you kind of specialize yourself out of business. So vendors have a tough time even in the design of products, let alone in the adoption. And then, stepping back one more to the macro industry, of course, everybody wants to crack our $12 billion TAM, but I think it's difficult not only because of the user and kind of design issues, but we have the Shark Tank, I like to call it, of the industry, where the big four are often buying up products before they even have time to mature. So even if something had struck the balance well on design, was getting there on UI, sometimes they're bought up before we even get there, so there's a dearth of really mature technology. And I think, don't want to end with doom and gloom. I'm hoping that AI can alleviate a lot of these things, because it can handle kind of fractal complexity, so maybe that fragmentation and lack of standardization can be handled by AI. You have the ability to do more with less with those technologies, so they might be able to get to consumer grade AI faster. and maybe even be profitable and resist the urge to sell to the big four. So we'll miss that, or have that alleviated. But I think the really interesting thing to me, because I kept racking my brain for why is AI the technology that legal is clamoring for, when I think we've been dragged kicking and screaming into most everything else. And I think it's because the wheels have been greased by the SaaS revolution. So you have internal capacity and capability to assess, maintain, and deploy tech. You have CISO's offices, GCs that understand technology. And so I think that from the buyer's perspective, we're going to see a less steep learning curve than the SaaS folks had to climb up in 2005.
Great. So I'm going to start with kind of a slightly different framework than what Oliver said around the three categories. As a startup building, especially enterprise software, there's really three ways to help your customer. You either help them make money, save money, or keep the CEO out of jail. And my last company, TextIQ, we were mostly doing the third. So our technology actually had a lot of success because it wasn't being positioned as a efficiency tool or something to save money. It was literally an added layer of risk reduction in high stakes litigations and investigations, where our value prop was, hey, do exactly what you're doing, let us do our thing in the corner, and we'll show you that the CEO is having an affair or whatever's going on that you didn't know about in your data that search terms weren't able to find. I share that because I think most startups, including the 5,000 legal tech companies that have emerged in recent years, have really kind of not thought deeply enough about what is the value proposition for the customer. And I think just now even we kind of lumped together enterprise and law firm. In my mind, enterprise and law firm are completely different customers and different incentive models, different value propositions, different cultures, different decision-making processes. Within those kind of two institutions, there's a whole wide range of differences between the different users, decision makers, buyers, saboteurs. When you're kind of really deep into the weeds working with customers and trying to sell your product, you start to discover all this. So I think to me there's kind of a couple of challenges that have sort of happened so far. Number one, maybe like a lack of deep thinking or understanding of the customer. That's often the case where you have really cool technology. It's pretty obvious that legal has a high degree of exposure to automation by AI, so many of us just start building. And then maybe you stumble upon somebody who becomes your first design partner. Great. Maybe someone else wants a demo. Awesome. Before you know it, you have three customers who have three completely different needs, and you haven't really thought deeply about if this delivers, what does that really mean for the customer? So I think I've generally seen kind of a lack of that in all the legal tech companies that I've come across for the most part. I think the more interesting kind of question, and maybe I'll just take, because my last company was exclusively Fortune 500 companies were our customers. UD is exclusively, all of our revenue comes from Fortune 500 legal departments, so chief legal officers who bring us in, and we're a platform. So I know that part of the market very well. I wouldn't claim to be an expert on selling to law firms or selling to consumers. But I think on the enterprise side, what I find most exciting is that there's now an opportunity to actually help the customer make money. And that's actually generally, when you look at enterprise software, the strongest value proposition. I would say saving money is kind of the least strong, and despite what everyone says about people being under pressure to do more with less, all of that, I think the reality is legal's kind of had the luxury of living on its own island, and it's very hard as a CEO, if you have a litigation or you have a major merger that's on the cover of the Wall Street Journal, you're not really that motivated to actually save money on your legal fees. It's usually a rounding error in the scheme of these kinds of value sort of opportunities. And so, saving money, which actually I think probably 90% of the pitches I hear are some version of saving time, saving money, efficiency, may not really sort of be powerful enough, I would argue, even if you succeed in doing it, for somebody to really change their behavior. I do think keeping the CEO out of jail is always powerful, and then if you can actually help the customer make money, that's incredibly powerful. And just to give you kind of a preview of how I'm seeing that start to kind of go down, one, I think the precursor to it, unfortunately, it's actually not an AI problem, it's really a data problem. And when you look at sort of how these enterprises work, they typically have data that's distributed across a variety of places, SaaS applications, a lot of knowledge that's actually distributed and often locked in people's heads. So whenever we've kind of even used the best model or the best kind of tool for the job to generate some kind of output, first time around, we generally see there's like a very low user satisfaction score. For someone who's not an expert, it looks amazing. For someone who's an expert, it looks terrible. Even the best LLMs, and I don't think it's going to change with all the updates that are being made personally, because the reason it's not delivering to that user's expectations is actually that it's failed to incorporate a lot of data and institutional knowledge that's actually relevant for that lawyer who's doing the work, who's been there for 20 years. When you actually look at how they do the job today, they're not sitting there limited to the contracts database or whatever kind of data source they're kind of working in. They're typically going to Outlook, they're calling a colleague to try to figure out, hey, the last time we had this thing, how did we handle it? There's all this kind of knowledge and data that's kind of unfortunately not readily available. And so for a legal tech company, it's very challenging because unless you actually have access to that data and knowledge, you're going to be very, very limited in the value that you can add. All that said, we kind of have broken through, I would say, and we now have a couple dozen Fortune 500 companies where we are deep, we are finally getting access to data after earning some trust. And I think one of the most exciting things, again, is that if you kind of rethink how you even define the problem, I think as lawyers, many of us are very used to applying a law firm-like mentality. Even if you go in-house, you typically started at a law firm, and at the law firm, it's very kind of, what is the thing that I'm supposed to be analyzing, evaluating? It's limited to kind of that one issue, and the dynamics of the incentive models are that the customer actually is disincentivized to share more than the minimum amount of information because every hour you spend talking to them, their bill keeps going up. So I think when you kind of think about it more from a big picture perspective, what is the corporate legal department really there to do? It's ultimately to, like every other department, increase earnings per share, and every opportunity to eliminate a cost, every opportunity to deliver some kind of insight that can actually help you perform better is welcome. And so I think just a couple quick examples, and then I can turn it over to the next person, is when you start thinking about kind of a twofold problem statement. Number one, how can we actually make the existing work more efficient while also delivering kind of insights that can actually blow the customer's mind, because you're actually starting to transform the function of legal from being a cost center to being a value driver to the business. Whether it's IP, litigation, contracts, we're seeing examples in all of them where the actionable insights and the converting the function of legal is probably not, it's too big of a pitch to ever have someone actually sign up for it on its own. But when you kind of marry it with, hey, let us take this kind of workflow today that if we were to break it up into all the tasks that are being done, the automation's happening on the task level, not on the job level. So let us automate the tasks that can be automated. You'll see an immediate, call it 2x productivity gain. But we're also going to be able to tell you, did you know that when your currency conversion clause happens over a 1 week period versus a 1 day period, your margin is actually 13% higher. And this is a real example, by the way. To generate that insight actually requires financial and operational data along with the relevant contracts. So it's not easy to kind of get the relevant data, and that's actually the bigger obstacle, I would say. But now that we're starting to get it, it's really, really exciting to see how even the definition of what it means to be an in-house counsel is starting to shift. And I would say moving much more in the direction of, like every other function, being more of a partner to the business than a pure cost center.
Hi, everyone. So when Oliver introduced me, he said what I do now, but I think Roland probably invited me because of what I used to do. So I was the founder and CEO of a company called Fairshake. We were one of the very few B2C legal tech companies. I'm one of the folks that Peter said is like ramming his head against the wall of those problems. So I kind of see things through that B2C legal tech perspective. A lot of the other folks here, I think, are more B2B enterprise perspectives. And when I look back at the last 20 years, and I haven't been in the legal tech space for the full 20 years, but I've been in the legal tech space for quite some time. I think back in 2009, 2010, there was this sense, at least for access to justice and B2C legal tech, that the regulatory environment was really holding us back. And that if we could just get out from under, UPL, fee-splitting regulations, there would be this explosion of legal tech productivity and access to justice. And I think that starting, probably as early as 2003, but then through, 2015, we really saw a lot of those regulations lose a lot of their bite and a lot of their strength, and a lot of the enforcement of those regulations drop, and they sort of ceased being a barrier to that innovation. And to the point where now, for a lot of B2C consumer-facing legal tech products, they have very aggressive business models that can essentially replace what a traditional lawyer was doing. And I think at the same time, we've gotten through that barrier, and we haven't seen this like explosion of access to justice driven by legal tech. And I think that what's happened is, we've had this major excuse kind of removed for this lack of innovation. And what we found is that it's actually extremely hard to create effective legal tech B2C business models. It's hard to get consumers to pay for anything that's legal. I think LegalZoom has sat in a very good space, for that for the last 2 decades, and they've been a really good player there. I think a handful of other legal tech companies have sort of...
Rocket Lawyer, come on.
Yeah, Rocket Lawyer. But I kind of associate you guys as like a B2B play. Maybe I'm wrong with that. But a handful of other companies and nonprofits in bankruptcy and some family law have gotten some traction. But I think that really we've learned that the real barrier there is actually the market, and that there are a lot of complexities with delivering services to consumers around the complexity of communicating with them, getting them to grasp these products, getting them to pay for these products, that's really the real barrier there. So, and I have lots of thoughts about that, and I'll just quickly say that I think that the more successful move, and the one that we're seeing actually get real traction as far as revenue and VC funding right now, are these products that reach consumers through kind of high volume, small and mid-sized traditional legal practices. They're building an AI agent that's going to replace a paralegal in personal injury, or something like one of these kind of high volume practice areas. So I think that that's kind of a Goldilocks zone that gets to a lot of this consumer. It lowers the costs and increase access to justice for consumers, but it's really mediated through these small and medium-sized law firms, rather than like a direct-to-consumer tech platform. So, Charlie.
Thanks for that. That was an awesome thanks, Teal. It's great to be back, and congratulations, Roland. I've probably been at CodeX speaker maybe 5 times over the 20 years. And it was just about exactly 20 years ago that I started my Rocket Lawyer journey, founded the predecessor company to Rocket Lawyer. And then actually LexisNexis was our first investor, believe it or not, in 2008. And it feels similar to that now with what's going on in the market. When we raised our first funding round. I guess I'll start with some facts. In 2005, so 20 years ago, the online legal services market was less than $1 billion. LegalZoom was about 5 years old at that point, and was really just getting started. And we were not even Rocket Lawyer. It was a different name at that point. When I initially started. Today, this year, it's estimated it's going to be $28 billion. I just want to put a couple things in frame. There were about 10 million lawyers worldwide in 2005. There's 15 to 20 million lawyers, depending on how you define it. They're defined very interestingly in Brazil. But again, about 50% growth in the number of lawyers. But get this, the GDP worldwide has doubled in the last 20 years. And so I think that, if I'm going to summarize, where Omar and Annie, they were sort of talking about SaaS and enterprise, and I think big law has actually gotten more efficient, significantly more efficient. I love Clio and my buddy Jack and what they've accomplished, which is what the last thing you were talking about. I think lawyers have gotten more efficient. Attorney fees have gone up, but not as much, maybe between 30–40%. In those 20 years, the hourly rate has gone up. But our industry worldwide hasn't grown, other than online legal services, which has exploded from less than $1 billion to almost $30 billion in that amount of time. And obviously, companies like LegalZoom and Rocket Lawyer have grown quite hundreds of percent or thousands of percent since then, and so has Clio. But overall, and kind of getting to my point and why I'm so actually excited, is overall, our industry hasn't matched just GDP growth. There are so many more transactions that need our services. Richard Susskind was right almost 20 years ago when he said there's this latent demand for legal services. It's literally been almost my whole career now, this latent demand for legal services. It is very complex. It is a regulatory disaster. This is a regulated, hidebound, monopolistic, and anti-competitive industry. I'll say it again if nobody heard me, okay? And those of us, probably everybody in the room for the most part, is in the fight to sort of have progress. But it's hard. Margaret's sitting right there. Margaret's been doing, has been out of the front lines of trying to make progress. The places where we have the UK, there is actually more access to justice. The UK would be in a real hurt locker if they hadn't created the Solicitor Regulatory Authority and given companies like Rocket Lawyer the ability to hire solicitors directly. With all the cuts they've had in legal aid and so on and so forth, we just know. The majority of people who use Rocket Lawyer have never hired a lawyer before. And now it's millions of people. But, I actually just retired from Rocket Lawyer. And I hope the company I started is going to grow and grow and grow. But one of the things I'm very excited about is there's just so much more to do. There's so much more to do. There's new tools. There's so many examples of success and plenty of failure, which is some of the things we're talking about. I've had plenty of failure in my career, but when you come to it and you look at it and you go, the online legal services market is 30 times bigger in the 20 years than it was when we started, and the company I founded has gotten a nice share of that. Many of the keywords now, Rocket Lawyer, that company has 10% or more of legal keywords. That's is a success story. Having said that, there's a ton more to do, and the majority of the efficiency, and I'll finish where Teal did, to my view, the majority of the efficiency has been, and investment has been supporting the existing basic market structure, which is law firms. It's monopolistic because it's so regulated. A computer can't be a lawyer, whereas a computer drove my car all the way here from San Francisco today. And that's got to change to keep up for legal services to keep up with the overall economy. Because the overall economy is being driven by and is about to be on steroids driven by these technological advances. And our industry is being absolutely held back to serving customers with the same tool sets that the customers are using to do all these magnificent things. So last thing, it is about cost, in my opinion. Affordability is everything. No matter what it is somebody does, I've never been wrong about this. If I walk in and can do it just as well for less, I win.
Marianne.
Okay, wow. So I love your example about your car getting you here. But what would have happened if you had a crash on the way? What would your car do? I think when Tesla, slammed under that truck, the car continued like a horse would if you fell off a horse.
I'm going to let you finish, but I'll answer that.
and no one really knows why. So, and yesterday there was a workshop not yesterday, the CodeX affiliate, on Tuesday about agents. And what really surprised me was how explanation is still one of the really big barriers. And I was heartened today by the invited talk where the speaker clearly sort of showed that, okay, it's search's time now. So in 2005, 20 years ago, it was all search. It was logic. I thought it was also interesting that physicists call logic search. And they are essentially the same thing. And I thought that was really exciting to see new kind of investment, new people playing with search. But imagine if we invested a few $1 billion into improving search and had armies of computer scientists just focused on search for a decade, which is about the length of time we've seen the same investment in deep learning, right? That would really sort of change it up in so many interesting ways. But I started as a computer scientist, but now I really work in innovation. And I think all of the speakers highlighted the real challenge, which is, the business model in a really tough environment. Peter Thiel says there's no way that PayPal would have been successful today because the environment is just so hostile and so difficult, just in finance. And I think law, there's sort of a few levels up. I don't know if you've read any sort of Mikio Kaku stuff. He's got 3 levels of impossibility. And I think if you put, PayPal today, that's going to be 1 level, right? Maybe we could get it done if we threw enough money at it. But I think law is sort of kind of at the next level, and I think that's what makes it really hard, but it also emphasizes why we need to do it differently. We can't just try and roll out, what we're doing, in the physical world or what lawyers are doing now, okay, and just kind of replicate it, even if we have the technology that can do it with LLMs and search. We have to be far more audacious, and I think that is also a challenge for the legal field. But, because of that incredible challenge that you were talking about, we need to be training a whole new generation who deeply understand how you, can undertake that sort of breakthrough innovation, and, focusing on the desirability maybe first, that, what does the customer want, and feasibility. I mean, I think AI, if we, put enough effort and money, we can solve it. I mean, even today search isn't as strong as learning, but it's still good enough to do really interesting things, right? With that, and so if we invested, well, first of all, if we knew what we needed to invest in, and that has to come from the customer, then, I feel like we could really get a lot of progress, right? Because what are the real barriers? There's sort of, once we bring logic together with learning in the way that we can today, then, what can't we really do? So I feel like the technical problems are very solvable. The bigger questions are around, what should we be building? And then how can we build a viable business model around that? Yeah.
If I may take just a moment, and then I'll turn it back to the panel. 3 or 4 things that have occurred to me as I've listened to you all. One of them is that there's this importance of the customer target. Who is the actual customer for the thing that we're trying to do? Sometimes in academia, we just think, hey, if it's interesting, somebody will want to do it, right? And the answer is no, not necessarily. It has to actually work for them, whether it's the 3 criteria we heard or the customer interface. Is it the B2B? Is it B2C? What is that customer? What will that customer actually pay some money for and adopt, let alone pay some money for it? Second big thing was, I think, as I hear it, is the immovability of the legal establishment, in effect. That what the legal system is, it's there, and getting it to do something different is hard. That goes back to my own 3.0 thing, where I thought, hey, we could get the legal system to do something else. I'm not sure that we've succeeded in that, for reasons that we've heard about. Partly that is, there is armoring in the legal system that makes it the legal system. It is meant to be slow to change in some ways. It's meant to be solid and dependable. It doesn't always succeed in that, but it's intended to be that. So in a sense, its stability is one of its virtues, and to destabilize it and create something new is going to be hard, because when something new might be better, might be worse, we don't necessarily know. I think we've got that problem of how do we actually take this tool and not just have it be a better way of doing the things we're already doing, but can we envision a next reality with that? And the final point I'm hearing also is resources. Where do we get the resources to do these things? The private sector I'm a fan of the private sector. I think it does wonderful things, but it is only a piece of what can be done in this field. That if we're really looking at sort of venture style funding and bottom line style returns, we get one set of activities. If we're looking beyond, we may be getting some other kinds of activities as well. So an interesting kind of thing. And that partly ties back into that piece of academia being a place where speculation, often not fruitful, but speculation can happen, and I think our interplay has been fruitful. I would turn those back and come back along the panel, just a quick thought or two on any of those. The customer target and experience, the entrenched interests, the resource questions. What are we thinking?
Right. I think, on the customer target, we've got enterprise side and practice side at law firms. We've got big law, mid law, small law. You've got in-house companies or in-house teams at companies of varying sizes and varying industries. Government attorneys, everybody's got a different tech stack that's going to be pretty entrenched, different security requirements, different risk profiles. So who is the customer is such a difficult thing to even suss out, I think, and people who don't understand the industry come in and say, great, I'm going to focus on legal, and they don't realize that then I think you need to get down into a segment to actually succeed, most likely, and depending on the product type, of course. But I think understanding that is step one. But then, as I said, because even once you get into that segment, you might have attorneys practicing the same type of law across all those segments totally differently, or even within the same firm practicing it differently. Good luck. I mean, I know why vendors struggle, but I do wonder if, like I said, AI can handle the level of complexity to avoid standardization and allow us to just customize for everybody. Because we've been trying to fight the standardization battle for decades and failing in a lot of ways. I think documents have gotten more standard, some things are standard, but when you get into the day-to-day of how someone's doing things, it's completely different, and they don't want to change their practice. So perhaps AI can get around that by just not forcing them to standardize at all and letting them just be the unique snowflakes that we love and cherish.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts on, I guess, both the customer and the entrenched point. So on the customer side, I was just talking yesterday to Mike Maples, who's a longtime mentor, friend, investor of my last two companies, this one and the last one. And for those of you who don't know, Mike is like the founding partner at Floodgate, early investor in Twitter, Lyft, Okta, Twitch, passed on Airbnb, and a few painful ones that he didn't invest in when he had the chance at like a $10 million valuation. So we were talking, and he kind of became obsessed with this question of, is he just lucky, or is there something to kind of picking out the right startups, and wrote a great book called Pattern Breakers, which I'd highly recommend. But one of the questions I asked him is, has any startup that's achieved product market fit ever failed? And he kind of went through all the data, and under the definition of product market fit that I'll describe in a minute, the answer is actually no, except for cases where there's some kind of fraud or some sort of like really crazy legal type of issue. And the definition of product market fit that Mike uses and we've now adopted is, what can you uniquely provide that your customers are desperate for? So there's two components of it: desperation, which goes beyond willingness to pay, but true desperation, and then what you can uniquely provide, because obviously it's a crowded market, there's 5,000 legal tech companies. So what you're doing better be unique, right? So I just wanted to kind of share that because I think it's really guided how I've gone about building companies, products, everything is like anchoring on not just who's the customer, but for that customer, how do you achieve desperation and something unique. On the second point around kind of the entrenched piece, I think many of us forget that it's actually quite recent in the scheme of human history that the law profession looks the way that it does. It was basically post-internet that the lawyer's job went from handling a very manageable number of physical documents to kind of crazy number that's increasing every year in terms of volume and velocity of electronically stored information. Law firms, I would argue, are the biggest beneficiary of that trend because on the whole, even if a much smaller percentage of their time is spent giving legal advice, they're still able to bill a lot of hours for going through mountains of electronic data, and they didn't turn that away. And that's how I think law firms became a $400 billion industry in the US over a relatively short period of time. The reason I mentioned that is I think there's a lot of questions I often get around this period, this point around entrenchment, and almost like the corollary, which is, oh, in the age of AI, how are we going to get trained as lawyers? I remember I had to suffer through doing, document review and discovery or M&A due diligence or whatever it is. That's not like been the case for very long, right? I mean, up until, I think it's long enough now that we have a whole generation that has been kind of trained that way. But I would argue that AI, augmented intelligence in particular, gives us the opportunity to kind of get back to, frankly, where we were before. And even though many things are entrenched, this one particular aspect of what legal work has come to mean, I would argue is actually probably likely to reverse quickly because it came relatively quickly, and we shouldn't forget that kind of arc of human history.
So I'll just quickly address the second point that you brought up about this kind of entrenched, kind of stodginess, aversion to change in the legal industry. So when I first entered, coming out of law school and practicing and then going into legal tech, I had a very, negative impression of the efficiency of the legal industry. And I thought it was, ripe for kind of revolutions in efficiency. And over my career so far, where I practiced at Cravath, I built my own law firm, I built a legal tech company, I worked for LegalZoom. My impression of that has sort of changed. And I actually think that the legal industry looks a lot like a lot of other industries, finance, the medical industry, where it is hard to adopt a lot of technologies that became available 30, 40 years ago and still have lots of room to grow in efficiency. And it's very easy to point to certain aspects of the legal industry and say it is uniquely resistant to change. But I actually think a lot of what we identify as, dumb inefficiencies wind up having reasons. And I think that it looks a lot like these other industries. So I'm a little bit more skeptical than I was coming into my career that we are kind of uniquely entrenched in our outdated inefficiency.
Yeah. I think that some of this is just a march of innovation, and there have been I gave the numbers. I think just sticking with online legal services, they grew a lot with the available technology. I mean, orders of magnitude. Now there's another set of technologies available that I think are going to lead to even more nonlinear growth. So I'm incredibly optimistic about that. I agree with Teal that there are less barriers to entry in terms of this sort of, what I described as anti-competitive regulation. There's less of that, and so again, I think the future is quite bright. I'm going to try to leave room for questions, but I did want to address the Tesla thing because this is data I didn't come in with, but I'm going to go get it, and I would like somebody to get it because I'll either be right or wrong. But my suspicion is that if the data set is how many accidents there are in Teslas, that autopilot is the safest way to operate a Tesla on the road. So that would be my theory.
I have a little data on that from our insurance initiative, which is that the insurance data suggests that the self-driving, the Venmo piece of self-driving is almost an order of magnitude safer, at least in terms of insurance claims.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that
think
would
they
be my
just released
guess.
data that there are 8 times less accidents.
Yeah, and that'd be my own experience when I have it on versus when I don't, especially on long drives. And one other, sorry, I'm going to be a little bit of an aside. I find it incredibly useful for stop-and-go traffic. Incredibly useful. I personally am far less likely to be distracted and bump into the car ahead of me if I have autopilot on. And I suspect other people are. And what to sort of wrap it up, I think we not can, but we will get there. Some of the issues that we've experienced, the barriers that we've bumped up against, and I'll give an example. There are more barriers in Europe. I've done business in Europe for 3 decades. There's more barriers to legal tech adoption in Europe than there are in the United States. I was blown away when we started to do business in Brazil with how quickly we started growing in Brazil once changes were made. DocuSign and digital signatures were illegal in Brazil in 2016. And then the pandemic, the first time I thought about doing business in Brazil. And then the pandemic happened, and Bolsonaro, he may go to jail, but he did make digital signatures legal in Brazil during the pandemic. And you've seen this real takeoff in legal tech in that market. So those examples are where I can see it, where you get some relief in terms of the sort of anti-competitive stuff and monopoly stuff, and then you start to see our products start to really scale. And I think we'll see more of that. And Gen AI is a Charlie's saying this, a transformative technology for our industry. Same with driverless vehicles. And that's the, if anybody's a law student, that's what I would be preparing for as somebody coming into the industry, is a world where everything that can be done with AI will be done with AI, which is what Nikos Negroponte said about in 1990, everything that can be digital will be digital. That's been our career, people my cohort. And the next cohort, I think everything that can be done with AI will be done with AI, period.
Marianne,
Yeah, really quick.
Take us away, and then we're going to go out for some
Okay.
questions. We're going to try and do, as Bruce has led the way, to call it folks at the 2 microphones in order as they appear.
Yeah. So I was just sitting here thinking, what am I going to say after you guys have grabbed everything? And I was thinking, well, what's the end game? We couldn't have Uber if we didn't have a mobile phone and the App Store and things like that, right? There are certain things you need to proliferate great technology. And, what do we need to get there? And so I think, that's what I'd be thinking about. And in terms of the kind of the inertia and the problem with business models and things, I think, industries change when the incentive to change outweighs the incentive not to change. And I think we are seeing, lots of changes in finance and in health, especially health and privacy. It used to be that privacy was just king in health, right? But now the incentive to actually share is sort of growing exponentially because we all win, right? If we can solve cancer by, sharing more data, I mean, what would any individual choose? And you reach this point. And I think, eventually this will happen in legal services and law and hopefully justice.
Thank you. Thank you, panel. And questions to the audience. We'll start here and then come over.
Thanks to the panel, really. What a great retrospective. So I wanted to build on Omar's point. As a Weil Gotshal associate in 1985, I had an Apple II Plus, and I programmed 64 megabytes to run 25 years of the default of the lease's value, let us say. And the managing partner of Weil calls me to his office and says, Bruce, you're going to spend a month writing the white paper on computerizing Weil Gotshal. And I come back and I say, Alan, we're not going to need as many secretaries and word processors. And he yells at me, what? We just spent, whatever, millions of dollars rebuilding all this office for this. I said, I'm sorry, that's the way it's going to be. And we're going to reuse stuff we did in the memos and whatever. That's 1985. But there was a small cohort of us techies within Weil, in bankruptcy and corporate whatever, and we saw the future, and we wanted the future. Fast forward to today, I do some research for Space Force, for the chief scientist of Space Force, and on how are we going to finance the space economy. And with colleagues at the Air Force Research Lab, we've looked in economic history at great innovations, so locomotion, aviation, et cetera, and we've tracked different readiness levels. TRL, technology readiness, MRL, manufacturing readiness, BRL, business readiness, IRL, investor readiness. I do think the legal tech industry needs to look at collaborative, what is the history of innovation, okay? What is the economic history of innovation? We can talk more at the break. We tend to be very insular as lawyers, and that's not helping us in finding other business models that we could use. So, you know, to Charlie's point, where's the revenue for consumer-based legal services? Let's be a little innovative. The consumer doesn't have to pay for everything if that saves an agency, et cetera. So I just would ask the panel, where's in this retrospective mindset that you've adopted, where do we learn from success and failure of economic models?
Do we have anyone want to pick that up? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think just going back to my conversation with Mike Maples, right? He's kind of studied this. One way of framing it is when you look at, maybe to tie back to what Marianne said, right, around Uber and Lyft, it took literally kind of the 4G specific innovation around location-based technology being at a certain point that gave rise to these kinds of businesses. And so there typically needs to be some kind of inflection and then kind of an insight related to that inflection for the people who are actually living in the future and thinking about working backwards of what does that imply for how I need to build my business today to be able to unlock that future. So I think that's probably one thing just to learn from, whether it's Mark Andreessen in the early days of having access to the internet before any of us did and needing to build the browser, what was then Mosaic, to be able to access it, and then seeing the potential a little bit earlier, right? I think the market timing point's a really important one, and again, limited in my little universe, which is Fortune 500 chief legal officers. What's kind of colored our strategy is really deeply understanding where do they see the function going, and I'm sure you could have experts on the law firm and the consumer side who have a similar vision, which is really grounded in kind of deeply understanding the customer, and then how that technology inflection is going to enable something that wasn't possible before. Start building that before others do, and yeah, you'll.
And Peter and
Actually,
CodeX
Bruce, if I can,
3,000
I need to go to the other. If I could take.
Great, thanks. Excellent panel. So I think there's a lot of truth, seems like there's a lot of truth to the different explanations for why we haven't maybe achieved what we were hoping to achieve. But I'm wondering what the panel thinks, just to the extent to which there's basically like a square peg, round hole problem. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Square peg, round hole problem, which is just that the technology that we've had has just really not been very well suited to law, right? We've tried to do things like take, the contract drafting process, and we'd said, oh, if only you could turn it into a series of rules, we could build an expert system to create contracts, right? Or litigation. If only you could map out the litigation process, you could, we could sort of create, sophisticated workflows that would help you. That, I wonder if that's just sort of like not reflected really very well or accurately how law works, right? Like it's a soft skill, it's about judgment, it's about providing advice. Hasn't lent itself well to automation. Whereas what I personally think is so exciting about generative AI right now, and what I see at the firm I'm at, is that people see that this is actually, it's meeting them where they are, right? Like it does the thing, people see how they could use this in their work in a way that's a lot more obvious and sort of powerful than the technologies that we've had up to now. So just curious people's reaction.
Yeah, I would jump on that really quick. The huge issue that with Gen AI for law is it's just wrong a lot. You only have to use it the way you just described for a few minutes, and you can really make hash of the whole thing. So it's really not, I don't know of any that's really ready for citizens, for regular folks right now, and that's the timeline that I'm unsure of. When it will be. Lastly, the prior generation, whether it's B2B or B2B2C, which is more how we would describe Rocket Lawyer, we were able to gain trust because we spent so much time creating these sort of hybrid systems between, I have a patent on it, between having human intervention in the system. But that's exciting work to do now, is because you're right, conversational is where it's at, except you're having a conversation with the Joker most of the time right now.
30 seconds because we're already behind time. Last comment. I apologize. The folks with questions, you'll come up after, and we'll.
So I just want to actually say I think that's sort of spot on. So I think that there's been a lot of attempts to engineer legal systems and look at them as these kind of rigid logical systems and computational systems when they're not actually that. They are flexible in a way that an engineerable system would not be traditionally. And that the promise of generative AI is that it grapples with flexibility. It's where you can't program something with logic and be rigid. So I agree with Charlie. I mean, I've tried to build products with generative AI, and I don't think that they're good enough for consumer legal products right now. But I think they will be in 5 years, and at that, or 10 years, or who knows how long. But at that point, I do think that you're right that you might have a round peg for a round hole.
Thank you.
We could go on with this for some time. Sadly, we're out of time because the next panel after a break is going to begin to look at where we go in the next 20 years. So,
all right, thank you so much. So, thank you for this wonderful panel.